Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Laws of Life webcast network. And right now starts the Laws of Physical Evidence, hosted by Dr. David Lipman. What is up, Dr. David?
Good morning, Blanca. I can't believe it's already a week since the last time we did this. Man, time flies.
I know, it goes so quickly. And today you have an incredibly special guest. Tell us about her.
Right. Well, this is Dr. Safia Debar, and she's coming to us all the way from merry old England, London, England. And I'm really excited for several reasons. Number one, I wanted to highlight today's law of physical evidence, and that is that sometimes emotional stress can hide out in the body and cause pain and disruption. And back in school, we were told about a book by Hans Selye called The Stress of Life. And in that book, he talks about the biochemical cascade that happens during time of stress in the body. So he kind of mapped out what happens in the body when we actually experience stress. And so for me, over the years that I've been practicing, many patients would come to me and say, I don't know why I have this pain. I didn't do anything. Could it be stress? And the answer is yes. But until I met Dr. Safia, I didn't really understand the pathways of how that all actually manifests in the body, aside from the biochemical pathways. But what's great about Dr. Safia is that she's not only gotten a handle on that, but provides patients a way to actually reverse that action and gives them the empowerment to actually unwind all that. So I know so many people, especially today, are suffering from that type of pain and disruption in their body that goes beyond pain. So Dr. Safia, I really appreciate you coming all the way from England today to share with us your knowledge about this, because I know so many people in the audience will be really interested to hear about this as it pertains to them.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a really pleasure to be here with you and to share some of this knowledge, because I think, especially in the context of a pandemic, it's critical to understand the basic neuroscience to enable us to leverage our brain and have it function how we function.
Absolutely. So can you just kind of outline, when a patient comes in that you know is suffering from this, or you're analyzing, is this what's happening and how is it manifested in this patient, and how do you walk patients through this so they can start to gain control over it? Like I do it from a musculoskeletal standpoint, from a mechanical standpoint, but you're taking it from a neurological standpoint, starting from the brain. So if you can share about that, that would be really interesting for me as well.
Sure. So the way I kind of explain it, you basically have two modes of function. So from a very primal standpoint, where fight, flight, or freeze response. Now, this functions from a place of the brain called the limbic system. We then have our prefrontal, which is just the area behind here. So if you think of it like a phone, we have two major processing networks. So we have function A and function B. Now we can only be in one place at a time. So I think the easiest way to think about this is, imagine, so I'm just sitting in my office and a lion walks into my space. What happens to my brain? Well, first of all, I kind of look at the situation, and the threat signaling pathway switches on. So I'm automatically then in a stressed state. I am then going to go into fight, where I'll fight, or I'll run away, or I'll make myself super small and just freeze. I will shut down. So I am functioning here from my limbic system. Now, it is important to remember that the primary function of our is survival and perpetuation of our species. So we are primed to go towards, to pick up threats. So coming back to our lion, that lion enters my space. I will then, what happens is there's a cascade that then ensues, which is a beautifully orchestrated domino effect. So as soon as my body recognizes, or my brain recognizes, that there is a threat, I will automatically switch on, or I will activate a part of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, and I will produce cortisol. So what I tend to explain is that will then affect each system, each organ of my body, because what I am trying to do is survive. I'm either going to fight, flight, or freeze. So if we go step by step and think about what is happening in my body. So number one, my brain detects this threat. So it's kind of red alert. My thoughts become catastrophic. Okay, so it becomes, oh my God, I'm going to die. Oh my God, he's going to eat me. Okay, so I become very narrow-minded. My senses heighten. What will I need to run? Well, I need an increased cardiac output, so my heart rate starts to increase. I need more oxygen to breathe, so my respiratory rate increases, so my breathing changes. I'm getting ready to run. What happens to my muscles, which you will know more about than me, but my muscles start to tense up. So everything then, muscular tension increases, my posture changes. What happens to my sugar stores? Well, I'm going to need energy, quick energy to run or to fight. So all the sugar in my system is released into my bloodstream. What happens what happens to my immune system? This is very important. Well, my immune system is not going to be worried about fighting cancer. It's not going to be worried about fighting a virus. What it wants to make itself is very inflammatory. My blood wants to clot. So in case I'm bitten, I'm able to clot easier. So my blood becomes stickier. What happens to my gut? Well, I don't need to be digesting right now. That's not a priority. What happens to my reproductive system? The same thing. I don't need to be thinking about periods or procreation or that switches off. So what I'm left with is a catastrophizing mind, a very negative view because a lion has just walked in. My immune system is pro-inflammation. My muscles are tense. My blood is thicker. My heart rate has increased. My respiratory rate has increased. My cortisol levels are up. My sympathetic, my adrenaline and my noradrenaline has gone up. So I'm in a state to deal with this. Okay, so this is us in fight, flight, or freeze.
Wow.
Now, so that is what happens when that system in the brain gets activated. That happens when we are in threat.
So let me ask you a quick question. Let me interrupt you for a moment. So we're using sort of an extreme example of, a lion walking into the room. But would you say the same thing tends to happen if somebody, and people tend to project and worry about things. Let's say they try to, see things that could potentially be harmful that's coming at them or stressful in the future. Does that same process happen without the sudden, lion walking into the room, but just from, hyper focusing on a thought that, evokes that fear response? Can that happen in the same way?
David, this is a cascade. So it's like a switch. So it's on or off. And we are the only mammalian species that can trigger our stress response through thought alone. So if you look at the animal kingdom, and when you're watching, documentaries on animals, they are either in their stress response, where they are fighting or running or freezing, or they're chilling. But our prefrontal cortex is much bigger. And so we have the ability to think. And we know that perceived stress is manifested in the same way. So I was talking about a real threat where that reaction would have been is advantageous, it's appropriate, and it will potentially save our lives. So that stress is good stress, right? I want my heart rate to go up. I want all of those changes because that's going to help me survive. But do I really want all of changes when I look at my phone, or when I'm in a difficult conversation at work, or when I'm overwhelmed with emails? So it's important to think about real, where I want it, and perceived, and start to appropriate, start to kind of leverage this knowledge so that I can then keep my stress response for when I really, really need it. And you might, so if there is a difficulty going on, you might notice your heart rate's going up. You might, a lot of people that come to you, it's muscular tension and so forth. So it's just a question of where is this coming from? Because remember, we have something in the brain called the negativity bias. So this means we are primed. This is an evolutionary thing where we are primed to detect the negative. We are primed to scan for threat. More than looking at the positive.
So that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why we prefer bad news. We prefer, we are more drawn to that because it has more of an impact on us. So
and I guess news networks know that because that's what they show us all day long.
Of course, and they know that sells. So it is kind of more catastrophizing and everything else. So, but it's important to note that we have the flip side as well, because I don't want it to be all doom and gloom.
Right.
So when we are in our prefrontal cortex, we are in a state of relaxation. We are in a state of rest and digest, and so when our threat has gone and we are in recovery, then all of that cortisol, all of that adrenaline and noradrenaline is mopped up. And so then we switch into more healing states of mind, more open, less judgment. We want to connect. Our heart rate, respiratory, everything goes down, and our immune system becomes is kind of more anti-inflammatory. So we start to heal and so it's just a question of knowing what our brain does and functioning from the best place and trying to get into our prefrontal cortex more. That makes sense.
Do you walk the patients through trying to understand that process and help them to try to sort of back out of that and back into that healing phase and that secondary phase? So that's really what your process is as a practitioner, I would assume.
Yeah, definitely. Because once you know, it's really working at the source and working with the whole individual. So looking at a holistic way of practicing, so that thinking, okay, gut will be affected by everything is interconnected. You can't take a system in isolation. So you have to look at the whole. And everything is determined by that initial stress cascade.
That's interesting. Do you find that it's fairly easy or more challenging to get people to kind of get in tune with these processes where they actually have conscious control over them? Or is it a difficult thing, or does it depend on the person really?
I think it depends on the person, but I think we all have in common that we don't want to suffer. We don't want to be in pain. And so if now the benefit is the neuroscience research is there. So I can show that, mindfulness, meditation, the right nutrition, balancing your hormones, movement, all of those, and it's about experiencing the changes. So that you can't be in a state of gratitude and resentment at the same time. So it's about recognizing the stress, but then looking at, okay, who am I at my best? And it's not about minimizing the stresses that we've all been through. I mean, we've all potentially been through, it's been a huge collective trauma. I mean, the pandemic has been massive and it has thrown us into lots of different directions, but it's about who am I in my prefrontal cortex? How can I function from there? And that's where the course comes in, and that's where the whole process. But once someone, it could be meditation, it could, whatever it is, you automatically start to buffer that stress, because stress is good for us. But if we strengthen our relaxation response, then we're automatically buffering.
Interesting. So it's like training anything in the body, because the body will adapt, and it becomes easier and easier for the body to sort of, become more efficient at that, if you will. That's interesting. So your coursework is something that people can actually log on to and sign up for themselves. Where's the best place for them to reach that for you?
So my website is www.rqwellness.com, or they can reach me on Instagram. And I have a conversation first to see if it's, if it's right, if it's a good fit. And really, it's just about kind of looking at the main areas. But I think the predominant thing is to see it from an evolution point of view, a growth point of view, and a learning point of view. I think we beat ourselves up a lot about how we feel, and but everything can be can be mitigated, I think. So
it's built
just
into
about,
us, really, basically.
yeah.
And that's great, because I think, and that's a great point that you just made, because a lot of people, and I find this a lot, I don't, I want to get working out, I want to start doing things, but every time I do, I'm hurting myself, and they do beat themselves up, they get discouraged, and it throws them into a tailspin, and it kind of makes the situation worse for why they're coming to me. And it's very difficult to break people out of that. But if you can present a more objective way to look at that, and they take themselves as a person out of it and say, okay, this is the machine I'm walking around, and this is how it works. How do I best, make it maximized, and how do I turbocharge it and do it, so it's going to perform the way I want it to. So it's interesting to take that effect and take the personal out of it, because, like you say, we're all walking around in the same machines that function the same way. It's funny, just you had said before about sort of functioning to focus on the healing and that aspect, because we tend to focus on the negative because it's built into us as a defense mechanism. And growing up, I used to worry a lot. I used to try to second guess things. I try to, really plan things out. And my grandmother was always just so happy-go-lucky, always just in a great mood. And one day when I was in college, I said to her, Grandma, how is it that with all these things that happen in life, that you're just so happy and blissful all the time? And I was expecting some big, profound response. But what she said was, look, there's good and bad in life. I just focus on the good. And that was her answer, which is what you just said.
Yeah.
And that's really a simple yet very deeply effective for the way our bodies can be, because it's really our choice. It's not what happens to us; it's how we respond to it, really, right?
Exactly. So we can't control certain things. We can't control the pandemic, but we can control what we make of it. And it's also honoring and giving ourselves the space to feel. So it's not about invalidating. It's not about suppressing any emotion. It's about allowing that space, but also not beating ourselves up for, looking at threats, and that's kind of inbuilt. So once you know that about yourself, then you can be a lot kinder and more compassionate, and start to focus. And it's really tiny changes. Tiny changes have massive effects.
Okay, well, I really, really appreciate that insight. I know a lot of people that are watching live, we're going to see this on demand, will really appreciate that too. All your contacts here so they can reach out, but I really wanted to thank you for taking time out of the day from England and just joining me here in South Florida for this show today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you. Blanca, back to you.
This was a super informative episode of the Laws of Physical Evidence, and let's all be sure to follow Dr. Safia Debar on Instagram. And everybody open up those IGs, go to Dr. Saf Deb for Dr. Safia, who is a massive resource of information. Be sure to follow Dr. David Lipman on Instagram at Boca Raton Chiropractor. Dr. David Lipman also attends our weekly Laws of Life networking group, which you're also welcome to attend. Dr. Debar, it's an international group. We have people from all over the world attending, people from Clubhouse. Remember, webcasting and networking go hand in hand. So let's get some more engagement. Watch the replays, ask the questions. Let's keep connecting. And it's an honor to have both of you this morning. Have a great day. Dr. Lipman, Dr.
Like us and share us.
All right.